What up? The NBA is a very interesting league, and over time, it has become extremely prevalent and known that even NBA GMs and owners of teams and other players have no ability to tell if a potential draftee will be good at the NBA level. So today, we are going to discuss some NBA draft busts. But I should add before I go into this that this is a list of players that I compiled, as well as some people sent me some names as well for me to discuss. And not all of these players are necessarily busts. I'm just going over players that have been given that title previously, maybe are on the border of being a bust or not. So I'll go through each player and just talk my thoughts on basically what's going on with them, if they are a bust, if they're not, if it was something else. So this is also in no particular order. First one, though, is Anthony Bennett, who was picked number one overall by the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2013. And he probably is the biggest bust of all time. So like I said, no particular order, but that's kind of just my thought process. But Anthony Bennett is a player that got drafted number one overall when he probably shouldn't have been drafted at all. So the size of the difference in what the expectation was and what the reality was just immense. It was absolutely ridiculous. I remember talking about Anthony Bennett before he was coming into the league. He was kind of rising up the draft boards. The 2013 draft was very unpredictable, and people were saying it was people were not saying that was the weakest draft in the recent memory. When it was first going on, it got called that years later, which is why everyone was saying the 2024 NBA draft is the weakest since 2013. But I don't really remember people talking about the 2013 draft being super weak when it was going on. But Cleveland had the first pick, obviously, and there was like really no consensus on who was going to go 1 through 5, basically. So I remember seeing a lot of mocks that were saying Nerlens Noel was going to go first. He wound up slipping down to, I think, 6, and got drafted by the Pelicans and then traded to the Sixers. But Anthony Bennett was projected to go like anywhere from like 5 to 15. Like his range was crazy. No one had him projected going number one overall. Like absolutely no one. I honestly, I did not see a single mock that had him going in the top 3. So if someone did comment, let me know. But yeah, he was clearly just not. I don't really know what the issue was. There wasn't at the time. I mean, I don't remember hearing like that he was injured or there was any sort of issue of him being hurt and he couldn't play because of that. All of the news that I've heard, from the time he got drafted to now, kind of just sounds like he wasn't really into it. Like he, just kind of grew up being bigger, stronger, faster than everyone else that he was playing basketball with, where he grew up in Canada. And he wound up, doing pretty solid at UNLV. And then, people thought that he was just going to continue to grow and have potential, but it seems like he just didn't really want it that bad. So he bounced around the league for, I think, not even 5 years. And to my knowledge, that's the only number one pick, maybe besides like Greg Oden, who just fell out of the league like completely. But at least in Greg Oden's case, which we'll talk about Greg Oden later, but Greg Oden like had injuries. When Greg Oden played, he was unstoppable. He was like one of the best centers I've ever seen play. But so Anthony Bennett, I really wish he panned out. I remember playing 2K14, and Anthony Bennett was unstoppable. Like by the time you hit like year 2 or 3 on a league or in my career, Anthony Bennett was putting up like 20 and 15, like absurd at 6'7", and he was unstoppable. He's absolutely unstoppable. So Anthony Bennett, huge bust. Kwame Brown. This one hits me a little bit harder because I'm a huge Wizards fan. So Kwame Brown, also similar to Anthony Bennett's situation. He didn't really have injury issues. He just was not the player that should have been picked. He probably should have been a late second round pick to an undrafted prospect somewhere in that range, and got picked number 1 overall. A lot of people remember this as, the draft pick that Michael Jordan screwed up, because Michael Jordan was the GM of the Wizards at the time. And then the Wizards were so bad after they drafted Kwame Brown that Michael Jordan had to come out of retirement and play for them. So that was pretty funny. But everyone had issues with Kwame Brown. I remember hearing stories about Kobe complaining about Kwame Brown because he didn't really want it. He just wasn't good. He was out of shape. He didn't really care. And I think there's been things that have come out, interviews that Kwame Brown has done and stuff like that, kind of like defending himself. And I know Gilbert Arenas is like, hates the guy. He's like so critical of Kwame Brown. But yeah, Kwame Brown is I don't know what was going on when Michael Jordan picked him. But Michael Jordan, great player, terrible executive, just absolutely terrible executive. Who else we got here? Michael Olakandi. Michael Olakandi, sure, I would say is a bust, but he's not as big of a bust as the other two that we just described, and Anthony Bennett and Kwame Brown. Michael Olakandi is more of a bust because he just shouldn't have been picked in that range. I think Michael Olakandi would have been really good if he was like a late first round pick, second round pick, something like that, because he had a decent career. Like, he put up double digits a couple times. He was a good rebounder to an extent. But the guy didn't play organized basketball, I think, until he was like 20 years old. So I think he grew up in like Nigeria or something, and then moved to England, and he didn't really play organized basketball. He was just a big guy, and I think from that point on, the NBA learned that, okay, you don't just draft somebody because they're big. Like, sure, it's great to get size, but if you have the number 1 pick in the draft, you should probably think about it a little bit better. And that draft had great players. I think Dirk Nowitzki went after him. Paul Pierce went after him. Vince Carter. So that was a miss. That was definitely a miss by the Clippers that picked him. But I think Michael Olakandi played for the Celtics as well for a while. Sam Bowie. Sam Bowie, similar to Michael Olakandi. But I think Sam Bowie had some more injury trouble. But Sam Bowie is just seen as such a big bust because he was picked 1 spot ahead of Michael Jordan. So, it's hard for me to say that he's like, I don't think people would view him as much of a bust if Michael Jordan wasn't picked immediately after him. But that would have been interesting to see Michael Jordan get drafted by the Trailblazers and how that would have panned out. But I don't think Sam Bowie is like a total bust. He definitely didn't live up to expectations. Like, you would wish that you would get a better player with the 2nd overall pick, but not. I don't know. I wouldn't discredit his career too much. This one's great. Jan Vesely. This guy. Okay, so Jan Vesely is like the bane of my existence. I remember watching the draft in 2011, and I didn't know a ton. Like, I'm definitely more into the weeds now with like what's going on before the draft occurs than I was in 2011. And I remember when Jan Vesely got picked, I was like, I have no idea who this guy is. And the analysts on TV were like, oh, yeah, this guy's like the European Blake Griffin. He's going to be an all-star in this league. He's the most athletic player we've ever seen come out of Europe. You know, all of this great stuff sounded great. And the guy plays, I think, barely 4 years in the league. He was the sixth pick by the Wizards in 2011. And I don't think he averaged more than, like, I want to say, like, 4 points per game. Like, and, like, no rebounds, nothing. Like, literally was just on the court to, like, play minutes, and that was it. He didn't do anything else. He has probably the worst player profile that I've ever seen in the NBA, ever. Yeah, he played 3 years. He played 3 years, and his career average over 162 games was 3.6 points and 3.5 rebounds. Shooting percentage wasn't that bad. He was a terrible free throw shooter. Shot 40% from the free throw line, but shot 52% for his career. And I think it's safe to say that he's not coming back to the NBA anytime soon. He had a decent career overseas, but still, like, a guy who gets picked sixth overall in the NBA draft should be putting up more numbers than he did in the NBA, and certainly more numbers than he's doing right now in the EuroLeague. But I don't know. I'm assuming whoever drafted him or whoever had any input in drafting him is now not with the Wizards anymore. They need to, if there is, they need to figure that now. So, before I get too angry and burn this place down, let's move on to the next one. Greg Oden. I said we would talk about Greg Oden. I don't think Greg Oden is a bust. I think Greg Oden is strictly a unfortunate circumstance because he was so good, and if he had panned out without the injuries, it still would have been hard to say that he should have gone over Kevin Durant, just looking at what Kevin Durant has turned out to be. But it really, if Greg Oden didn't have the injury trouble they did, I would say he's a fine number one pick. Like, I would have no issue with him being the number one pick at all. But the injuries just got to him. The Blazers had a lot of rough luck with high draft picks and injuries. Like Brandon Roy too. Brandon Roy really got hit hard with injuries. So, but if Greg Oden stayed healthy, he would have been a perennial all-star. Like, no doubt in my mind. Another big man, Darko Milicic. Darko Milicic is a bust. Darko Milicic is certainly a bust. He did not have as long of an NBA career as he should have had, being the number 2 overall pick. He did win a championship, though. He won a championship with the Pistons, so that was lucky. I'm not exactly sure how that worked out, by the way, but I need to do a little research and figure out how the Pistons even had the number 2 pick, because to have the number 2 pick and then go to the championship next year and win, like, that's pretty crazy. But nonetheless, Darko was just terrible. Again, it's kind of a situation where he got drafted ahead of players that were really good. He got drafted ahead of Carmelo Anthony, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, tons of really good players. And, that one of those players would have really helped the Pistons. They won the championship anyway, but imagine what they could have done if they had Carmelo Anthony or Dwayne Wade or Chris Bosh. That would have been crazy. So Darko Milicic, bust, absolute bust. Derek Williams, the number 2 pick by the Timberwolves in 2011, behind Kyrie Irving. Yeah, he's a bust. He's a bust. I mean, this again, similar to Anthony Bennett, Derek Williams is one of those guys that when you played NBA 2K11 or NBA 2K12, his potential was like through the roof. Like, you play a couple years in the league and then Derek Williams is like the scoring champion, like crazy numbers and but he just didn't pan out. And frankly, I don't really know why. He had excuse me, he had a bunch of good tools that any NBA player would want. He was super athletic. He just wasn't. He had a good jumper. It just wasn't consistent, and he just never really caught a rhythm. He just never really caught a rhythm. But I remember watching this guy's like pre-draft workout videos and stuff, and he was just like yamming the shit out of the ball, like really just like killing dudes in his workout. And like, I don't know what happened. I really don't know what happened. But James Wiseman. James Wiseman, it's still kind of early. Like, he does have time to turn it around. James Wiseman, number 2 pick, 2020 NBA draft. I mean, again, it's being a bust is so much about who you got picked over. And, like, the Warriors picking James Wiseman over LaMelo Ball, especially considering what they're going through now without having Klay Thompson. Like, Steph Curry and LaMelo Ball, like, that's box office. And you're probably getting to the playoffs. So that's a miss. And to just, they dealt him away pretty quick, too. And that's, like, how you kind of know that, like, the guy really is, like, not panning out. Because, like, if a team really had faith in him, like, most teams would in their number 2 overall pick, like, you're not trading that guy that quickly. You're really not trading that guy that quickly. Jahlil Okafor. This one's tough, too. I mean, yeah, I would say he's a bust just because he's not in the league anymore. And, like, to be a number 3 overall pick and to just, like, be out of the league like that, like, that's tough. That's tough. But that was, like, I feel like the situation he got drafted to just kind of, like, it just kind of messed him up because, like, they had drafted Joel Embiid the year before. And Joel Embiid was obviously out because of injury. So that first year that Jahlil Okafor played, he was averaging like 17 points per game. Like he was really like putting up numbers. And like it's everyone will say it's one thing if you put up numbers on a bad team, but 17 points per game in the NBA as a rookie is like pretty decent. And it's not like he was shooting like 20%. Like he was like. He was getting buckets and he was like getting a couple boards and stuff. Like he was decent. I think the thing that held him back was he just like didn't really stay in shape that much. Jahlil Okafor had a tendency to like fluctuate his weight a lot, and I think eventually it just kind of got the best of him. And then, after I think like year 2 or year 3, like his stats were just dropping off significantly. He started getting traded and waived, and when that happens to a young player, especially when he's probably not in the best headspace because he's losing so much for the first time in his career, it's tough. I remember that video came out of him like fighting some dude like on the street, because he was like talking to him or whatever. Like there was some fan talking, and Jahlil Okafor was like heated. Like some dude had to hold him back, and it's just this video of this like really small dude like trying to hold back Jahlil Okafor from beating the lights out of this fan. But, yeah, I mean, I think Jahlil Okafor was in the G League. He might still be in the G League, but, I hope things go well for him. I remember one of my boys in high school was like so big on Jahlil Okafor. He's the best post player since Tim Duncan. He's gonna revolutionize the league, and if the league didn't move so far away from like post play for like big men, and didn't have this emphasis on like the stretch 5 and the stretch 4, like Jahlil Okafor might very well still be in the league. He might not be putting up numbers, but he'd probably be a rotational player. But, some things just don't go your way in the league. And the way it shifts, it's not up to you. Marvin Bagley. This is a tough one. Because Marvin Bagley is not like, he's not a bad player. He's just, again, he got picked ahead of Luka Doncic. He got picked ahead of Trae Young. So when that happens, everyone's going to look back and say, "Oh well, the Kings could have drafted Luka Doncic, and they didn't." So it's tough for Marvin Bagley to kind of live in that position. But Marvin Bagley's on the Wizards now. He's a good dude. Like he's a down to earth guy. Like I've seen a lot of his interviews and stuff, and I genuinely do think he wants to get better. And like when he got to the Wizards, mid season this past year, he was playing pretty well. Then we traded Gafford away, so he had some more minutes and stuff, and he showed some flashes. Marvin Bagley was disgusting in high school, like just absolutely filthy. Like the way this guy was just meddling with his opponents when he was in high school was absurd. So if you haven't seen Marvin Bagley's hoop mixtapes, go check that out because you will be like, wow, like this guy was doing that. Yeah, that guy. So check that out. Hashim Thabit. Oh, 110% bust. Like just absolute bust. So this Hashim Thabit goes back a little bit. So Hashim Thabit, 7'3", like a legit 7'3", and pretty athletic when he was in college. Like when he was at UConn, like he was like swatting shots left and right, like playing crazy defense. I think he was averaging like over 4 blocks a game. So he seemed like, this is a good pick. So the Grizzlies took him second overall, 2009, behind Blake Griffin. The next pick was James Harden. Pick after that was Tyreke Evans. And then a few picks later, Steph Curry goes off the board to the Warriors. So, obviously if Memphis had that pick back, they're probably taking James Harden. Maybe they're taking Steph Curry. I don't know, but that was a miss. And for Hashim Thabit to play as poorly as he did was just absolutely incredible. Like terrible, absolutely terrible. I think his averages in the league are less than 4 points per game. But he played for the Grizzlies. He bounced around to the Thunder for a little bit. I think he played for the Rockets as well. So big bust. Adam Morrison. Adam Morrison is definitely a bust, but I think he had injury issues. Adam Morrison, I caught a little bit of Adam Morrison, but that was kind of towards the end. And Adam Morrison also won a championship. So it's hard to like give a guy a bust label if he like won a championship. I mean, he definitely didn't play up to expectations. He's more one of those guys that had a really good college career and then just didn't pan out in the NBA. But I don't know. I just wouldn't necessarily call him a true bust because he won a championship. It's just really hard to call a guy a bust if he wins a championship. Tyreke Evans. I don't think Tyreke Evans is a bust at all. I mean, I think the thing about Tyreke Evans is he just had the most unique like career trajectory that I've ever seen. Like he had like an amazing rookie year. He won Rookie of the Year and was averaging like 25 and 5. He was like one of the only like handful of rookies that had ever done that, like joining like LeBron and I don't know, like Tim Duncan, like just like crazy lists of people. And then the next year he was still good, but his production declined, and then the next year his production declined, and he just kept like declining. And I just didn't really know what it was. I think he had some injury issues as well, but it was just such a shot down, and it was sad. Tyreke Evans was like one of my favorite players. Like that's another guy's hoop mixtape that you should look up. Tyreke Evans' hoop mixtape is absurd. Like especially like at the pro-am stuff that he does, he's like going in between the legs. He's got the craziest dribble moves. Like he was low key like a Jamal Crawford 2.0. He just didn't pan out. But I love Tyreke Evans. I wish he was still in the league. Ooh, Thomas Robinson, another Kings pick. There's a lot of Kings picks on here, so sorry if you're a Kings fan. This is probably hard for you to listen to. But Thomas Robinson was the 5th overall pick by the Kings in the 2012 NBA draft. And I remember that I thought this pick was definitely going to be Andre Drummond. And I remember they called Thomas Robinson, and I was like kind of hyped because like I remember seeing him play at Kansas and like there was all these crazy stories, like, you know, like his mom passed, and then I think his grandma passed. Like, it was just like the dude went through like a ton of hardship, and he was a good player in the league for a little bit. I don't think he played more than 5 years, but he just didn't have the same level of production that he had in college. And to me, it didn't look like he was playing as hard as he did in college. You know, and maybe that's because, you know, he just, you know, it's hard for a guy that young to go through all the shit that he went through and get to the league. He's taking care of his, you know, younger sister, and, you know, has all this money. You know, it's easy to kind of just like sit back and relax and be like, you know, like, I'm still gonna work, but I can't work that hard. Like, I made it, you know, and I get that on some level. But as far as like, did he meet expectations? No. You know, and by the time I think he really caught on to it, it was too late. You know, and he was undersized too. He was like basically playing center, and he was like 6'7". So he didn't really pan out the way that people thought he was going to pan out. But would I say bust? I don't know, but definitely did not meet expectations. Oh, Michael Beasley. Michael Beasley's not a bust. Michael Beasley is definitely not a bust. I don't think he's a bust. Michael Beasley is wet. Like, that guy, I was watching the Big Three basketball league today. Michael Beasley was working motherfuckers. Like, absolutely just tearing people up. And, you know, I think Michael Beasley is just a guy that loves basketball. I think he's also had just like some personal circumstances where he just hasn't been able to be the most effective player on the court. But he had seasons in the league where he's putting up like 17, 18 points a night, like consistently. He just wasn't super consistent. You know, and it's hard. It's hard to be in the league and average 20 a night and like be consistent. Like, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is like the one guy in the league that I've seen that like literally is able to drop like 30 points every night, like 30 points on the dot. Like, he's within 5 points of that every time he plays. It's crazy to me. It's like he's got the game on cheat codes or something. But Michael Beasley, I can't call him a bust. I really can't call him a bust. You know, and the 2008 draft was good, you know, but they just got riddled with, you know, some bull. Derrick Rose too, but Derrick Rose isn't a bust. You know, Derrick Rose just had extremely unfortunate things happen throughout his career. Ooh, okay. And this is the last one I got on this list. Jordan Hill. This is kind of like in the same realm with Hasheem Thabeet because they were in the same draft class. But Jordan Hill was the pick ahead of Steph Curry. And, oh wait, no, he wasn't. No. Jordan Hill was not the pick ahead of Steph Curry. Jordan Hill, I believe, was the pick after Steph Curry. Hold on, I'm looking this up right now because I don't want to be wrong about this. Jordan Hill was the 8th overall pick in the 2009 NBA draft. Yeah, Steph Curry was 7, so Jordan Hill was not. Yeah, so no, I mean Jordan Hill had a good college career at Arizona, but I don't know if I would call him a bust. Yeah, I don't know. This one's tough for me. For a second, I thought that he went the pick before Steph Curry, and then in that case, I'd be like, yeah, dude's a bust. But like, he had a pretty like long NBA career. Like, he played like 8 years. Like, I remember going to a Lakers game when I was younger and like seeing him playing with Kobe and stuff, and like he was serviceable, and he like played his role. You know, like he kind of knew what he was. You know, he had a good year on the Lakers, 2014, 2015, averaged 12 and 8. So, yeah, you want to get more out of your 8th overall pick, but, you know, I don't know. I mean, the Knicks also traded him his rookie year, so, like, that's a tough situation to be in as a rookie anyway, but that's crazy. I literally thought that Jordan Hill got drafted the pick before Stephen Curry. because I have so many friends that are Knicks fans, and they're like, "Oh, we could have had Stephen Curry," and I'm like, "No, you couldn't have." And I guess they just said it to me so much that I literally was like, "Oh, they could have had Stephen Curry," but it's not how it works. But that's a typical Knick fan type of thing, though. It's like, "Oh yeah, we should have had Steph Curry." Like, no, you shouldn't have, because you didn't have the pick. How are you going to get Steph Curry? But so no, Jordan Hill did not go before Steph Curry. If he did, I would say, okay, he has a little bit more of a reason to be called a bust. So that's the whole list that I had compiled from myself and people that sent me players that they wanted me to discuss. So let's rank them. I'm not going to rank all of them. I'm just going to do my top three. I think my top three is obviously Anthony Bennett is the biggest bust in NBA history. So he's number one. Second biggest bust in NBA history is probably Kwame Brown. I feel confident saying that, just because also a number one overall pick that should not have been picked anywhere near that range. Probably shouldn't have even been picked in the first 45 picks of the draft. And then who would be third? I'm going to say Hasheem Thabeet. Hasheem Thabeet is probably the third biggest draft bust of all time. Simply because so many other good players got drafted after him, and he's 7'3". Size was not an issue for him, and still wasn't able to stay in the league. So, and he got plenty of chances. Like he got a couple teams that he could play for, he just couldn't do it. And to have that great of a college career and then just kind of like go downhill, like there's probably stuff they could have done better, and he just didn't. Crazy thing is Hasheem Thabeet is still playing basketball. I think he's like 37 now, and he's still playing basketball somewhere. I was looking at it the other day. I think he's playing in like either in Europe or like in some league in Africa. He's doing something. So hope he's doing well. But yeah, Anthony Bennett, Kwame Brown, Hasheem Thabeet. Those are my biggest NBA draft busts of all time. So if you guys have some comments on who you think should be mentioned in this list, who you think might be some of the worst draft picks in NBA history, let me know. Write a comment. Like, subscribe, do all that jazz. Let me know what you guys want me to talk about next. Peace.